Okay, today, boys and girls, we're continuing on with Who Was Mr. Rogers? And we're starting on chapter 2, Early Lessons. One day, when Fred was 8, his school let out early, and the family driver could not pick Fred up. He started to walk home by himself. Soon, Fred noticed a group of boys following him. They made him nervous, and he walked faster. Then they began calling out insults. "Hey, Fat Freddy," they yelled. "We're going to get you." Frightened Freddy ran to the house of the neighbor. She let him come inside and stay until the boys left. Then Fred's parents found out what happened. They told Fred not to worry about it. If he acted like he didn't care what the boys said, they'd leave him alone. The problem was, Fred did care. His feelings were hurt. He didn't understand why those boys were so mean. There was one person Fred knew he could always count on, though. Ding Dong. That was his grandfather. The nickname came from a nursery rhyme his grandfather sang to him. This is Fred's grandfather, Fred Brooks McFeely, and they would call him Ding Dong. Ding Dong always knew how to make Fred feel good, and Fred loved spending time at his grandparents' farm on the weekends. At home, he often had to sit inside quietly. His mother's tidy home was not to be messed up, but at the farm, there was plenty of room to run around and explore. One thing Fred wanted to do was climb the stone walls that wound all over the farm. He knew his mother wouldn't let him, though. The walls were old and falling to pieces. He might hurt himself. Sure enough, when he asked her for permission one day, the answer was no. Then his grandfather spoke up. "Let the boy climb the stone walls," he said. "He has to learn to do things for himself." Fred was thrilled that his grandfather trusted him. He spent the next couple of hours climbing the walls. At the end of the day, Ding Dong told Fred, "Freddie, you made the day special just by being yourself." For a boy who didn't have much self-confidence, it was an important thing to hear. Fred never forgot those words. George Allen continued to be a big part of Fred's life and shared many of his interests with him. George taught Fred about photography, and Fred discovered he liked to take pictures, especially ones with people in them. George also introduced Fred to jazz. Fred loved how the music sounded. It was full of surprises. Another of George's passions was flying. In the 1940s, George helped train a group of African American pilots who attended Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. The Tuskegee Airmen, as they became known, were an important part of the American forces during World War II. When Fred reached high school, George taught him to fly a small plane. George's enthusiasm rubbed off on Fred. A plane used by the Tuskegee Airmen. The best teacher in the world is somebody who loves what he or she does and just loves it in front of you, Fred used to say. For a while, Fred wanted to be a pilot, too. In high school, Fred still felt like he was chubby and weak, so he saved up $19 and sent away for a mail-order exercise program. Then he did all the workouts, but they didn't work. Fred realized he was never going to look like a bodybuilder. He was just going to have to be himself. Fred found the things he was good at and concentrated on them. He joined the French club and the photography club. He edited the yearbook and wrote for the school newspaper. He was elected president of the student council. He had finally found his place. Fred for president. Chapter 3. Leaving Home. Fred graduated from high school in 1946. By then, he changed his mind about becoming a pilot. Instead, he decided to become a diplomat, someone who works with people from other countries to help solve problems. He enrolled at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. He planned to study foreign languages like French and Italian. They would help him talk to people from different parts of the world. After a year, though, Fred decided he didn't like Dartmouth very much. The winters were long and cold. He thought the teachers weren't very friendly. Plus, he missed making music. Fred transferred into the music department at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. He liked the people at Rollins College, and the warmer weather was nice too. One of the first people Fred met was another music student named Joanne Bird. She was amazed by how Fred could play the piano by ear without using any sheet music. Sometimes he played popular songs everyone knew. Other times he would make up one on the spot. No one else could do that. The two became very good friends. At Rollins, Fred was a good student. In 1951, he was sent to graduate with a degree in music. Then he wanted to continue his education at a seminary, a place where he would study to become a minister. Fred had grown up going to church, and he wanted religion to be an important part of his life. But everything changed during his last year of college. When he came home for a school break, his parents had a surprise to show him. They'd bought a television. Television was still very new in the early 1950s, and not many families owned one. Fred had never watched TV. He was curious to see it. Later, Fred could not remember the name of the first program he watched, but he did remember one thing. It was terrible. It showed people throwing pies in each other's faces. Fred thought it was just a silly waste of time. TV was coming into more living rooms every day. If the programs were made well, television could be both entertaining and educational. It could be a wonderful way to reach people, especially young people. The early days of television. One of the very first television stations to begin broadcasting was from a General Electric plant in New York State in 1928. But not too many people saw the news programs that WRGB aired 3 days a week. Almost no one owned a television set yet. By 1951, there were about 10 million sets in the United States. Everything was still broadcast in black and white, and stations did not broadcast overnight. But audiences loved all the entertainment they would watch without having to leave their homes. Most shows were broadcast live, meaning that audiences saw them at the same time they were being performed in the studio. By the mid-1960s, color television sets began outselling black and white ones. After watching a single show, Fred made a big decision. He told his parents that he wasn't going to the seminary after all. Instead, he was going to look for a job in the television business. They were surprised. And Fred, not sure Fred had thought things through. "You've never even seen it," they told him. "Well, I've seen enough of it here that I'd like to try," replied Fred. He knew he was doing the right thing. Okay, so we are done reading chapters 2 and chapters 3. We will see you next time to read chapters 4 and 5. Bye. Have a great day.